Book 3, Void Miner, The Belt War. Prelude, The Corporate Sword. The shipyards above Mars burned with light, not fire yet, but industrial glare. Welding arts danced across kilometer-long hulls. Magnetic cranes hauled armored platings into place. Swarms of EVA workers moved like ants along skeletal framework of new ships. The dry dock airlocks hissed, releasing pressure as another Titan-class dreadnought slid free from its cradle. The HCS Iron Meridian, a monster. 2 kilometers of reinforced hull, triple shielded, armed with rail batteries large enough to punch through planetary crust. Inside the operations tower of Helix Orbital Command, Director Enoch Valen watched the ship drift into its first powered maneuver. His expression stayed neutral, but inside, something cold and satisfied curled behind his ribs. "How many Titans does that make?" asked one of the junior executives standing behind him. Valen didn't turn from the viewport. 6, 2 more launching next quarter. "And deployment schedules?" Valen finally spoke, soft, measured, precise. "Acceleration orders have been approved. Full fleet mobilization within 36 hours. First wave moves on belt sectors Alpha through Gamma. Secondary waves will target Delta stations and rogue trade lanes." Silence followed. Somewhere behind him, holodisplays flickered with data. Ship tonnage reports, fuel burn calculations, and casualty projections, all neatly calculated and filed. A sharp voice interrupted. "Director," said Commander Lucian Merrick, Chief of Helix Fleet Strategic Deployment, stepping into the room with a slate pad under one arm. Merrick's face was hard angles and old scars. A soldier, not a boardroom strategist. "This board's authorization has arrived," Merrick said. "We have full operational green light under Directive Prime." Valen nodded. "Public statements?" "Prepared and queued for system-wide broadcast. Media filters engaged. Narrative locked." Another flicker of data streamed across the glass wall in front of them. Target lists. Vega Point, Ceres Station, Vesta Freeport, Nix Outpost. Any belt-registered independent asset in active resistance. And at the very top of the list, highlighted in red, Arsten, Arg Augustus. Status, high value. Target, enemy combatant, kill or capture. Valen's gaze lingered on that name for a long moment. "You've made yourself quite a symbol," he murmured, almost amused. Behind him, the boardroom remained still. No one spoke the obvious. That Helix's entire belt operation, years of quiet control, had been shattered because of one stubborn, grief-soaked miner refused to back down. Valen finally turned from the viewport, smoothing a hand over his lapel. "Deploy all available enforcement fleets, prioritize suppression strikes on communication hubs, shut down the belt's ability to coordinate." "Yes, Director," Merrick said, already relaying orders to the fleet's AIs. "And Merrick," Valen added, pausing in the doorway, "if Arg Augustus Arsten is still breathing by the time this is over—" He let the thought hang, unfinished but clear. Merrick's answering smile was thin and wolfish. "Understood." The light of the dry dock dimmed briefly as another Titan's engines ignited. In orbit, war began to move. Fast, relentless, final. Chapter 1, Flashpoint. Arg stood on the cold deck, plating of Vega Point's main hangar, staring up at the Dust Widow like he was seeing her for the first time. Her battered hull loomed above him, covered in a patchwork of fresh welds and temporary repairs that barely concealed the damage beneath. Dull gray plating stood beside scorched black pockmarks. Some sections had been left raw and jagged, holes sealed with nothing more than heat-cured polymer and stubborn hope. The Widow looked like hell, like a ship that had seen too many fights and survived out of spite more than engineering. But she was still here, just like him. Arg reached out, dragging callous fingers across her flank. The metal was cold, even inside the pressurized hangar. Beneath the skin of steel and ceramic composites, he imagined he could find her pulse, the faint hum of reserve power coursing through her primary conduits. The ship was wounded, exhausted, but alive. And if she could keep standing, so could he. Behind him, the hangar buzzed with frantic energy. Sparks showered welds from rigs as crews worked overtime to patch up everything with a hull and a reactor core. Men and women moved between grounded ships, dragging fuel lines, ammunition crates, and oxygen recyclers on battered grav carts. Engineers barked orders. Station mechanics cursed at stripped bolt heads and failing power couplings. Everywhere Arg looked, there was motion, repair, reinforcement, and fear. The air smelled like ozone, burnt insulation, and metal dust thick enough to stick to your throat. Vega Point had survived the last Helix assault. Barely. But the station wouldn't survive without a miracle. "Your girl looks rough," came a familiar voice. Arg turned to see Rel standing nearby, a grease-smeared data slate under one arm. His coveralls were stained with coolant and welding dust. His dark hair matted with sweat. Black smudges streaked across his forearms, where he'd wiped his hands one too many times without grabbing a cloth. "She's holding together," Arg said. "On optimism and duct tape." "That's how we do things out here." Rel snorted, but didn't argue. Instead, he flicked his slate to life and started scrolling. "Damage control logged 12 critical system failures on the Widow," he said. "Your portside maneuvering thrusters are offline, the rear shield emitter's cracked and running at 40% output. And unless I can convince 3 different supply chiefs to cough up parts they don't have, you'll be flying with 2 operational missile tubes and 1 missile-lined railgun." Arg rubbed the back of his neck. "So, better than usual." Rel gave a dry, humorous laugh. "You're going to get us both killed." "Inspiring confidence as always." In truth, confidence had nothing to do with it. It was calculation, survival math. The kind Arg had done automatically for years now. You learned how much hull breach you could patch with tape and stubbornness, and how far a reactor could be pushed before it blew. And you never counted on backup. Not out here. Arg's gaze shifted across the hangar. Miners, station crew, ex-fighter pilots. They moved between ships like ghosts. Tired, hungry, angry, and scared. They'd held Vega Point barely, but everyone knew this was just the start. Arg could feel the next wave coming like a pressure front. "They're asking for you back in ops," Rel said, breaking the silence. "Lyra again?" "Her and half the Belt Leadership Council. They're taking evacuation plans. Or maybe stand and fight plans. Depends upon who's shouting loudest." Arg dragged his hand through his hair and let out a low breath. "Great." "And there's this." Rel jerked his thumb toward the far wall where one of the station's big holoscreens flickered. A loop of Arg's last Void Miner video played on repeat. His face, dirt-streaked and bloodied, standing in this very hangar, making his declaration. "If you declare war on the free people of the Belt, then the free people of the Belt declares war on you." The words felt heavier now, like a promise the whole station expected him to keep. Arg shook his head. "Never thought yelling into a camera would start a shooting war." "You didn't," Rel said. "They started it. You just gave it a voice." Before Arg could answer, the overhead lights flickered. Then the station-wide alert tone hit, sharp, synthetic, ear-piercing. The emergency broadcast system kicked in, hijacking every screen and speaker on Vega Point. A Helix logo appeared, black and silver, followed by a calm, cold voice Arg had learned to hate over the last few weeks. "Director Valen." "Citizens of the Belt," Valen's voice began, smooth and deliberate. "Your continued insurrection has forced Helix Interstellar to escalate response protocols. Effective immediately, all non-compliant Belt territories are designated hostile. All independent vessels operating without corporate authorization will be considered enemy combatants. Enforcement actions commence within 48 hours. Compliance remains your only path to survival. Then the feed cut out. The hangar went silent. For several seconds, no one moved. Then slowly, the air filled with muttering voices. Quiet at first, then louder. Swearing, fear. Orders shouted between crews. Somewhere near the far end of the hangar, someone kicked over a supply crate hard enough to send it skidding. Arg let the noise wash over him. He turned back toward the widow, rolling his shoulders like he was settling a weight across them. 2 days, maybe less. That's all they had. Orders? Rel asked, standing beside him again. Arg climbed the nearest maintenance ladder, grabbing hold of the cold steel rung. Get the widow hot, he said without looking down. Fuel her, load everything we've got that explodes, then double-check the reactor bleed lines. I don't want a repeat of the Kovac burnout. Copy that. Rel was already turning towards the tech teams, shouting commands. And Rel, Arg paused at the top of the ladder, glancing over his shoulder. Yeah? After that, find me a quiet corner with a functioning camera rig. Rel raised an eyebrow. Another video? Arg gave a tired, grim smile. They've declared war on us, he said. Time to answer. And with that, he ducked into the ship. The Dust Widow's hatch sealed behind him with a hiss of pressurized air. Chapter 2. Lines Drawn. The ops deck of Vega Point smelled like old copper and stress. Air scrubbers struggled to keep up with the sheer number of bodies crammed inside the command level. Every console hummed under heavy load, running tactical overlays, fleet tracking, and station-wide diagnostics all at once. The central holo display showed a wire-frame map of the belt, with Vega Point pulsing in soft green, surrounded by an expanding perimeter of red. Helix fleet markers, hundreds of them. Arg stood near the back wall, arms crossed, watching the map like a man waiting for the guillotine to drop. The room pulsed with voices. We don't have the hulls for a direct engagement. That was Lyra Kellen, one of Vega Point's senior defense coordinators. Her voice raw from too many arguments in too little time. We evacuate now and we scatter, Herovos countered from across the room, stabbing a finger at the map. Helix wants us isolated. They're betting on us running scared. If we break formation, they'll pick us off system by system. Evacuation buys us time to regroup, Lyra shot back. Or it gets half our population vented to vacuum when Helix blockades the transit lines. Stop shouting, someone else barked. A dozen conversations blurred together. Half the council, half the surviving fleet captains, a scattering of belt faction reps, and more than a few independent miners. Every voice competing for oxygen and control. Arg stayed quiet, for now. Rel stood beside him, hands in his pockets, chewing on the corner of his lip like he wanted to speak but didn't trust himself yet. Arg glanced over. How long until the widow's ready? Best guess, 12 hours until she's space-worthy. 24 if you want that aft shield grid patched. Call it 12. We won't have 24. Across the room, the conversation lurched again. We should surrender control of the station, said a younger voice, Juno Grell, a relay operator from Ceres who somehow ended up with a seat at the table after the blockade incident. Negotiate terms. Helix won't massacre a civilian station outright. They want control, not a bloodbath. That earned her a room full of stares, some pitying, most furious. You think Valen's sending Titans to have a friendly conversation? Harrow sneered. They won't stop with Vega, Arg said finally, his voice cutting through the noise like a knife. Silence settled over the ops deck. All eyes turned towards him. Arg pushed off the wall and stepped forward towards the holo map. You surrender this station, they take it. Then they move on to Ceres, then Vesta. Then every rock with a working transmitter and enough people to raise a middle finger at corporate rule. His tone stayed low, steady, but sharp enough to draw blood. Lyra frowned. We're not soldiers, Arg. Neither am I, he said. "But it doesn't matter anymore. We're all combatants now. Helix decided that for us." No one argued, because they knew he was right. The map shifted again, zooming onto Vega Point's orbiting plane. Helix fleet elements were on the move, burned signatures from multiple Titan-class dreadnoughts, frigate squadrons flanking them, drone carriers deploying recon wings. Arg watched as a fresh enemy marker appeared on the outer edge of the sector, 40 hours out, maybe less depending upon their burn acceleration. "They'll hit us hard," Hera said, scratching at his beard. "First wave will have target comm relays and station shields. Cut us off, blind us, then they'll send boarding parties." "And we've got what?" Lyra asked bitterly. 3 retrofitted haulers, 2 converted prospect rigs with hull-mounted turrets, and a half-dozen angry miners with EVA suits and welding torches. "More than that," Rel said, stepping forward. Lyra blinked. "Oh, what brilliant reinforcements do we have that I haven't heard of?" Rel pulled up a side feed on the holo projector. "Take a look." The screen flickered, showing a stream of live Void Miner channel comments, thousands of them. Scrolling so fast, the text became a blur. Usernames from across the belt, solo operators, long-haul captains, drifters, prospectors, all chiming in with the same message. "We're coming. Tell us where to fight. The belt stands with Vega Point. You held the line, we'll hold it with you." Arg felt his throat tighten. "They're watching your feed, Arg," Rel said. "They saw the blockade run. They saw the declaration. And now they're moving. Independent ships from Nyx, from Vesta, from sectors we thought Helix already locked down. Some of them are armed. Some, not so much. But they're coming anyway." For the first time in hours, the room's tension shifted, not gone, but tilting. Fear gave way to something else. Anger. Resolve. Harold gave a rough chuckle. "Well, hell, looks like you're famous now." Arg ignored the comment and pointed at the map. "We've got 40 hours, he said. "Here's what we do." And with that, the real planning began. Fleet positions, ambush vectors, decoy burns, kill zones. Vega Point wouldn't survive on brute force, not against Helix's fleet. But if they could drag the corporation into a dirty, close-quarters fight, use the belt and the debris fields, and the wreckage as cover, they might stand a chance. Might. As the council broke into smaller groups, Arg lingered near the holomap, running mental simulations, weighing risks he didn't have time to fully calculate. Rel stepped beside him, holding out a battered compad. "You're going to want to see this." "What is it?" "Transmission logs, incoming bursts from the Widow's system inbox." Rel gave a thin smile. "Your channel subscriber count just doubled, and your last video, it's viral now, like system-wide viral." Arg gave a low, tired grunt. "Huh, perfect. Fame and a death warrant, just what I always wanted." "We're past the point of going back, you know." Arg nodded slowly. He knew. As he glanced across the ops deck, at the council reps, the miners, the engineers scrambling to finish their repairs, he knew one more thing for certain. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was war. Chapter 3. The Next Message. Arg sat alone in the Dust Widow's cockpit, staring at the inactive recording rig mounted above the console. The cabin lights were low, running on minimal power, while Rel and the station crew scrambled to finish final repairs outside. The Widow's systems hummed beneath him, faint vibrations through the deck plates, but it felt distant, like she was holding her breath, waiting, same as him. The small, cracked display on the console showed the countdown timer. 39 hours, 17 minutes until Helix arrival. Arg rubbed his eyes with both hands, trying to clear the ache that had settled behind him. The kind of ache that came after too many adrenaline spikes and not enough sleep. The kind that told him this is your last calm moment for a long time. His gaze drifted to the old patched-up flight chair beside him, the empty one. The seat had never been used, never needed to be. But tonight, for reasons he couldn't explain, It felt heavier in the corner of his eye, almost like someone should be sitting there, telling him to rethink this, telling him to stand down. But there wasn't anyone. Not anymore. Just him, same as always. Arg reached forward and powered up the camera rig. A small green light flickered to life, illuminating the space directly around him. It cast sharp shadows across his face, highlighting the creases under his eyes, the grime still smeared along his jaw from the hangar floor. For a long time, he didn't speak. The feed timer counted up. 5 seconds. 10. 15. Finally, Arg exhaled through his nose and hit the record button. Void miner channel, entry log, whatever number this is now. I've stopped counting. His voice sounded rough, low, like gravel in his throat. He paused again, letting the silence stretch. This isn't a mining update. Not today. He leaned back slightly, eyes narrowing. But now, most of you've seen what happened. The blockade run, Vega Point holding the line, the Helix declaration. Arg hesitated. His thumb hovered over the stop button for a second. He could kill the recording, walk away, pretend this wasn't happening, let someone else carry the weight. But no, that wasn't how this worked. Not anymore. He cleared his throat. 40 hours, he said quietly. That's what they've given us. Helix says we've got until then to surrender. After that, they're bringing full force engagement. Titans, frigates, drones, ground teams. Arg let the words hang, giving them room to settle. They're calling this a security operation, a compliance action. But you and I both know what this is. It's not about control. It's about making an example out of us. About sending a message to every free rock between here and Saturn. His eyes drifted to the sensor readout. The station's comnet was still pinging with incoming bursts from across the belt. Ships reporting in. Miners offering help. Messages from old hauler crews out near Ceres who barely had weapons but were turning around anyway. Arg shook his head, almost in disbelief. I didn't plan any of this, he said after a beat. Hell, all I wanted was to mine my rocks and be left alone. That's all most of us wanted. Another pause, longer this time. His fingers tapped nervously at the console. Terry used to say I had a bad habit of getting in deeper than I planned. The name slipped out before he could stop it. He froze for a second, staring at the floor. That ghost wasn't welcome here. Not tonight. With a slow exhale, Arg forced himself to push on. I guess she was right, he said, voice quieter now. But I'm here, and so are all of you. The notification counter in the corner of his screen ticked higher. More live comments. Messages from ships inbound. Some he recognized by call signs. Others just minor tags and relay known IDs. People risking everything for a fight they weren't built for. Arg's throat tightened. This won't be clean, he said, eyes locking back on the camera. It won't be surgical. There's no hero script. No backup fleet coming from Mars or Earth just to save us. It's just us. Our hulls, our grit, and the belt. He swallowed. I'm not going to tell you to stay out of this, because I already know most of you won't listen. The hollow screen flickered as more pings rolled in, long haulers, prospecting MiGs, even a few ex-military junkers from the fringe zones reporting readiness. Helix declare war on us, Arg said, voice settling now, low, final. And if that's the game they want to play... Another long pause. His hand curled into a fist on the council. Then the free people of the belt declare war on them. Silence stretched inside the cockpit. Like a final signature, Arg leaned in slightly, locking eyes with the camera lens. I'll see you out there. And with that, he killed the feed. The little green light blinked out. The cabin returned to dim shadows and cold metal. For a few seconds, Arg just sat there, staring at the blank monitor. Finally, he stood, pulled on his flight jacket, and headed towards the airlock. Outside Vega Point's hangar, lights glowed blood red with emergency status. Sirens started cycling across the deck. Final pre-battle alerts, the sound of a station battening down for its last stand. And Arg was done waiting. Chapter 4. First Blood. Vega Point's hangar was a different animal now. Gone were the scattered maintenance crews and half-finished repairs. The floor thrummed with unified motion, organized chaos. Every ship captain and deckhand moving with a shared urgency that hadn't existed a day ago. Miners in patched EVA suits ran final checks on suit seals. Old freighter pilots pulled tarps off jury-rigged missile pods welded to cargo bays. Even station janitors were hauling ammunition crates, their faces pale but determined. The Dust Widow sat near the far edge of the hangar, already spooled up and hot. Reactor on lines. Weapons primed. Arg's pre-flight checklist glowed green across the hood. Rel stood at the bottom of the boarding ramp, helmet tucked under one arm, data pad in his hand. "You've got inbound support markers from 15 ships so far," Rel reported, scrolling through the list. "More still burning hard from Ceres Sector and Vesta Relay. Some of them won't make it before the first wave hits." Arg nodded, already halfway into his flight harness. "We'll work with what we have." "The Widow's ready to fly. No guarantees how long she'll hold in a firefight. But she'll fly." "That's all I need." For a second, they both stood there in the quiet before launch. Rel scratched the back of his head, shifting awkwardly. "You know this is suicide, right?" Arg smiled grimly. "What isn't?" Rel snorted, then offered a quick salute. It was sloppy, half a joke, but the meaning landed. Arg returned it with a sharp nod and sealed the cockpit hatch behind him. As he powered through the Widow's launch sequence, the station's tactical net crackled to life. "Ops control to all friendly vessels. Helix advance detected. ETA to engagement, 2 hours. Final formation coordinates uploaded." The tactical display on Arg's screen updated in real time. Dozens of green friendlies blinked into view, solo haulers, retrofit mining rigs, a few aging security corvettes from belt defense contracts long since expired. And in the distance, like a gathering storm, Helix fleet markers loomed. Arg switched comms to General Fleet broadcast. "This is Void Miner," he said, voice steady, clear, deliberate. "All ships holding defense grid formations. You're not alone out here. Remember that." The response wasn't formal. It wasn't polished. But one by one, his comm panel lit up with acknowledgments. "Copy that, Void Miner. Standing by. All burners hot. Let's give them hell." Arg sat back in his seat for a second, breathing in slowly through his nose. This was it. No more second guessing. No more running. The next time he pushed his throttle forward, it would be into combat. Real combat. Not evasive runs or blockade dodging. Not survival drills. War. He keyed a direct channel to Vega Point Ops. "This is Arg Arsten," he said. "All systems green. Widow is ready for launch." Ops control came back fast. Harrow's voice this time. "Copy that, Widow. You're cleared. Good hunting." The hangar launch doors rumbled open, splitting apart like the jaws of some mechanical beast. Beyond them, space. Cold, black, endless. Arg throttled up. The Dust Widow's engines roared to life, and she surged out of Vega Point with a growl that rattled her old frame down to the bolts. In moments, Arg cleared the station's shadow and leveled out into open belt space. Dozens of ships filled the sector, spaced in a loose defensive grid around Vega Point. Some drifting slowly and steadily on minimal thrusters, others burning hard to reach assigned positions. A mix of hulls that had no business fighting together, converted tugs, old survey ships, a few stolen corporate scouts, and more mining rigs than Arg could count. None of them were built for this, but every one of them had their weapons armed. Arg pulled up his forward sensors. Helix was coming in fast. Dreadnoughts, frigates, drone carriers, full combat stack. Already at long-range scanner distance, their formation spread wide, optimized for sector control, trying to push the Belt fleet into a retreat before the first shot even fired. Arg let out a slow breath. The Widow's targeting system struggled to get reliable locks that far out. Half her sensors were still jury-rigged from the last battle, but it didn't matter. The fight would be close soon enough. "Widow to all ships," he said over fleet-wide comms. "We hold the line here. Repeat, we hold the line." A chorus of affirmative answered him. Arg's hand hovered over his controls, ready to push burn the second Helix crossed into range. No speeches now, no broadcasts, just action. Through the canopy, he watched the first flickers of light erupt from Helix's forward batteries, long-range kinetic slugs and fast-burning missiles streaking towards their grid. The Belt answered with every gun they had. The war for the Belt had begun, and Arg was right where he belonged, at the tip of the spear. Chapter 5. Patterns in the Chaos. The first Helix salvo screamed through the void like lightning across black water. Arg watched from the Dust Widow's cockpit as kinetic rounds rippled past his forward viewpoint, slugs the size of passenger cars moving fast enough to vaporize anything unlucky enough to catch one broadside. The Widow's maneuvering thrusters fired in short, violent bursts, rolling her belly out of the firing lane just as a spray of railgun fire shredded the space she'd occupied 2 seconds earlier. "Close one," Arg muttered, half to himself, half to the ship. His hands worked instinctively on the control yokes. Throttle and vector yoke, thrusters, toggles moving under his fingertips like extensions of muscle memory. The Widow bucked and twisted, diving through a debris field where the first wave of impacts had torn apart one of the old Ceres haulers. The comms net was a wail of noise. "Hull breach on starboard, rerouting power. Drone wings coming in low vector. This is the Dawn's Echo. We're hit. We're losing drive." Arg gritted his teeth and rolled the Widow hard to port, cutting close enough past the crippled Echo that he scraped paint off her portside hull. No time to apologize. The next Helix frigate was already lining up for a barrage run. "Target lock. Come on," Arg growled, eyes flickering to his weapons display. 2 of the Widow's 3 functioning railguns were hot. The third stayed stubbornly dark, still misaligned from earlier damage. He flipped targeting priority to the incoming frigate, let the solution lock, then squeezed the trigger. Twin bursts of hyper-accelerated tungsten rounds tore across space. The first volley missed, but the second caught the frigate across its dorsal stabilizers, punching a ragged hole through its secondary sensor mass. The ship veered off, trailing coolant. It wasn't a kill, but it bought time. Arg threw the Widow into a snap roll, diving under a cluster of flak detonations. Red warning lights flared on the console, radiation spikes from a nearby reactor hit. His heart pounded, sweat trickling down his neck despite the cold. This was worse than any blockade run, worse than Kovac. But as the Widow weaved between wreckage and weapons fire, something strange started to happen. Arg's eyes flicked between sensor readouts and the enemy fleet formation, and the patterns began to emerge. Helix's frigates moved like clockwork, perfect formation, spacing, predictable maneuvering curves, always following the standard tactical doctrine. The drone carriers deployed in scripted wave patterns, sending their autonomous wings in 3-vector pincer attacks. Even the dreadnought rotated their shields facing in sync, timing broadside cooldowns with staggered support fire. Textbook corporate fleet coordination. Too clean. Too rehearsed. Arg's mind clicked through it like gears finding mesh. "They're not adapting," he whispered. The realization hit like a punch to the gut. For all their firepower, the Helix fleet was treating this like a simulation, a war game. They were executing their playbook against an enemy they expected to fold. And worst, they weren't adjusting when it didn't work. A grin, thin and sharp, crept across Arg's face. "You're predictable, you bastards," the comms crackled. Rel's voice came through from one of the station's tactical feed. "Arg, Helix drone wings are moving for another sweep across grid sectors 8 and 9. They're trying to isolate the station's fuel transport." Arg's hands flew across the console. He pulled up sector overlays. The drones were fanning wide, using a bait-and-choke pattern, something Helix-trained manuals would call a sector shear. But they were spreading too thin on the approach. Arg's grin widened. "They're overcommitting," he said. "Classic grid split." Rel's confusion buzzed back. "What?" "Never mind, just trust me." Arg flipped to the general fleet channel. "All ships near grid 8 and 9. This is Void Miner," he said, voice sharp and fast now. "Pull lateral vectors back 20 clicks. On my mark, I want every ship with forward thrusters to burn full speed straight at the drone formation. Push right into the middle." A beat of silence followed. Then Harl Voss's voice came through, gruff and incredulous. "You're telling us to charge into a drone wing?" "Exactly that. Trust me." Another pause. Then Harrow swore under his breath. "You're out of your damn mind. But fine." Arg counted down from 3 and slammed his own throttle forward. The Widow surged ahead, engines screaming as she pushed towards the leading edge of the drone swarm. Behind him, a ragtag wave of belt ships followed suit. Miners, haulers, survey ships, all burning hard into the kill zones. The Helix drones reacted, but too late. By the time their targeting AIs recalculated for close quarters combat, the belt ships were already inside their formation, point-blank range, too close for effective drone maneuvering. Lasers flared. Hull-mounted autocannons barked. Belt ships opened fire from every angle. Drones died by the dozens, ripped apart by raw kinetic strikes, melted by improvised plasma beams, or simply smashed out of space by ramming runs. Arg dove the Widow through the chaos, skimming so low, under 2 drone wings that warning sirens screamed in his cockpit. The Widow's rail guns belched fire again, shattering a drone carrier's starboard armor. On the tactical map, a gap opened. The Helix drone screen was buckling. Arg's pulse hammered in his throat. For the first time, they were winning. "Rel," Arg shouted over direct comms. "Tell ops to reposition grid defenses toward sector 12 through 15. If I'm reading their next move right, that's where they'll try their next push." "You sure?" "No," Arg said, hands already dancing across control inputs for the next maneuver. "But I'm right." And somewhere deep in his gut, he knew he was. The years he'd spent dodging rocks, calculating drift paths, timing engine burns through asteroid debris, those same instincts were reading the Helix fleet like terrain now, one giant moving field of predictable vectors. And Arg Arsten had spent years surviving bad terrain. As the belt ships tightened their formation for the next counterpunch, Arg felt something shift inside him. He wasn't just reacting anymore. He was leading. And the Helix fleet had no idea what was coming. Chapter 6. Holding the Line. Arg's cockpit smelled like burnt insulation and sweat. Warning lights blinked across half his consoles, and the Widow's left side thruster was running hot enough to trip fail-safe alarms every 20 seconds. Something in the reactor coolant system gurgled in a way that didn't inspire confidence, but the ship was still flying. And for now, so was Vega Point. Arg's tactical display updated again. The Helix fleet was adjusting, slowly. Their command AI had finally recognized the lost patterns in sectors 8 and 9, and now their drone wings were reforming into tighter, staggered waves, more cautious, less overextended. The bigger threat, though, was coming from the dreadnoughts. 2 of them, Helix Sentry-class Titans, were breaking formation, burning hard towards the inner defense grid. Their rail batteries spooled up for a full saturation bombardment. If those guns opened fire at close range, Vega Point's shields wouldn't hold, not even for a minute. Arg swore under his breath. "Widow to fleet, shift priority targets," he barked across the open comms. "Dreadnoughts on intercept vectors 3, 7, 9. We don't stop them, Vega Point goes dark." More acknowledgments lit up his screen, but not enough. Too many of their ships were scattered, too many still engaged with smaller Helix strike groups. Arg's mind raced, working through firing arcs and intercept windows. "Rel, talk to me," he snapped over the direct line. "Do we have anything that can punch through Titan-class shields?" Rel's voice came back with heavy static, strained and fast. "Negative. Best we've got our 2 mining lasers hot-wired into the Charon and a handful of reactor-spiked torpedoes. Arrow's people are cooking up. Arg grimaced. That wasn't going to be enough. The Widow's own railguns wouldn't even dent Titan shields at this range. Another proximity alarm wailed as a Helix gunship broke through the outer perimeter, targeting him directly. Arg yanked the Widow into a vertical climb, throwing inertial dampeners into overdrive and pushing himself hard against the seat harness. The gunship's lasers scraped across his lower hull. The Widow's aft plating lit up like a magnesium in vacuum, but she held. Barely. Arg rolled, lined up his forward battery, and let fly. 2 shots. 1 clean hit. The Helix gunship folded in on itself, breaking apart into spinning debris. Arg sagged in his chair, gasping for breath. His chest ached, shoulders burned, vision blurred around the edges. "You're too old for this shit, Arg," he muttered, voice half a growl. His head throbbed like someone had driven a spike through his skull. Every muscle in his back screamed from the G-loads. But there was no stopping, not now. His console flared with incoming priority signal, station control, direct patch. Harrow Voss's face appeared in the inset display, blood on his temple, emergency lights flashing behind him. "We've got a shot at one of the Titans," Harrow barked. "We're pushing the Charon and what's left of the remnant wing in on an intercept course. If we can breach their forward shield arc, we might get a shot at the reactor." Arg's brain caught the plan mid-scream. "That's suicide," he said. "Better than waiting to die standing still." Arg's gaze snapped back to his sensor feed. The Helix dreadnoughts were less than 10 clicks from optimal firing position. It was now or never. Arg punched his thrusters and pushed the Widow towards the left flank, falling into formation beside 3 other belt ships already burning in. "Widow to Charon and remnant wing," he keyed across the fleet channel. "I'll cover your run. Give me 3 minutes to clear their escort line." Harrow's voice came back, grim and fast. "You've got 2. We're already moving." Arg's hands blurred across the console, locking target situations on the nearest Helix interceptors, screening the Titan's approach vector. He opened fire, burning through 2 with precision rail shots, then dumped his remaining missile load into a cluster of inbound drones. The belt ships followed his lead. A converted ore tug rammed a Helix patrol craft head-on, sacrificing itself in a plume of fire and shattered hull metal. Another prospector rig unleashed a full load of scrap pellet munitions, an improvised shotgun blast that tore through a formation of drones like paper. The space between Vega Point and the Helix Titans turned into a killing field. Arg grit his teeth and shoved the Widow hard into a high-angle dive, sliding past flak bursts close enough to shake the cockpit. His display chimed. Harrow's ships had breached the dreadnought's outer perimeter. One of the remnant wing's light frigates took a direct hit, gone in an instant. The Charon, engines screaming and hull shields barely holding, punched through the breach behind them. Arg watched from half a click out as the Charon's forward tubes flared. 2 reactor core torpedoes launched at point-blank range. The first torpedo struck the dreadnought's shielding head-on, lightening the entire sector in white-hot plasma. The second torpedo slipped through. Arg didn't have time to yell, didn't have time to cheer. The Helix Titan exploded. A rolling shockwave of light, debris, and ionized gas tore outwards, engulfing 2 nearby Helix frigates and slamming Arg's ship with enough force to trigger every structural alarm he had. The Widow spun out, tumbling sideways, her artificial horizon flapping end over end. Arg fought the controls, screaming at the ship like it was a stubborn mule. Hold together, come on, girl." After what felt like forever, he stabilized. The dust cleared. 1 Helix Titan gone. The second was already repositioning, turning away, adjusting its vector back towards Helix Fleet Command. "Pull back signal," Arg whispered, seeing the formation shift. They weren't retreating, not fully, but they were hesitating, for the first time. The Belt Fleet reformed, battered but breathing. Arg sat back in his chair, lungs heaving, heart pounding. His hands shook. Sweat dripped into his eyes. As the Widow's status alarms finally fell quiet, Arg laughed. A short, bitter, exhausted laugh. "I really am getting too old for this shit." as he wiped his face on his sleeve and started preparing for the next round, because this fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. Chapter 7. Second Wave. The quiet didn't last. Arg barely had time to reroute power from the Widow's failing aft dampeners when the tactical net lit up with new warnings. Alert. Helix fleet reconfiguring formation. Multiple new signatures detected. Second assault wave imminent. Arg eyes flickered across the updated scanner feed. The Helix dreadnoughts pulled back behind a new wall of support frigates and carrier-class vessels. The gaps in their formation, gouged open by the Belt Fleet's first counterattack, were closing fast. And worse, fresh Helix reinforcements were dropping in from high orbit, emerging from their long-range fold jumps like knives unsheathed. "This just keeps getting better," Arg muttered under his breath. He switched comm channels, hailing Rel back at Vega Point. "Status report on station shields." Rel's voice came through, rushed but clear. "Holding, just barely. Power relays are burning out faster than we can patch them. The next heavy strike and we're through." Arg closed his eyes for half a second, taking that in. Not good. His gaze shifted back to the tactical feed. Helix's new formation was tighter now, more disciplined. The initial mistake from their first engagement had been corrected. Their drone wings stayed closer to their capital ships, moving in protected flocks rather than widespread lines. Their next approach wouldn't be reckless. It would be coordinated, methodical, and deadly. Arg opened fleet-wide comms. "This is Void Miner. Listen up. They're coming in heavy and focused this time. No more piecemeal strikes. This is going to be a full push on the station. If Vega Point falls, none of us get out of this." Several voices came back at once. Harrow out on the station perimeter, already reforming what was left of the remnant wing. Captain Duros from the old cargo carrier Solus Drift, running weapon overrides to force their aging railguns to cycle faster than they were ever rated for. Even small groups of solo miners were checking in, those still flying after the first engagement. The belt was bloodied, but far from broken. Arg leaned forward in his seat, pulling up a projected path overlay for the incoming Helix wave. Their lead elements were accelerating at a steady burn rate, giving themselves enough speed to overwhelm the outer defenses in one pass. The second echelon, the support frigates and gunships, trailed by a few thousand clicks, ready to mop up survivors and apply pressure where needed. Arg's eyes narrowed, the separation between echelons. It wasn't much, but it was there. Just enough of a gap to work with. A thin line of hope in a sky full of closing steel. He switched channels again, this time direct to Harrow. "Do we still have any of those pulse mines left?" Arg asked. Harrow laughed bitterly on the other end. "We've got 6, maybe 7. Why?" "Good, I want them seated along this trajectory," Arg said, sending updated target vectors over the net. "Just off grid enough that they won't register on Helix sensors until they're inside the blast radius." "You think that's going to stop them?" "No," Arg said bluntly. "But it'll slow them. Maybe break their velocity lock before they reach firing range." Harrow gave a grunt. "You're starting to think like a tactician, Arg. Don't insult me." That earned a chuckle before Harrow signed off to get it done. Arg sat back for a moment, staring out the Widow's viewport. The stars beyond seemed still, peaceful, indifferent. It made the coming violence even more heavier. He pulled up secondary comms and patched a local line to all remaining solo haulers still operating independently. "This is Void Miner to all the unaligned rigs still in the fight," he said. "If you're still fight capable, I need you on scramble defense grid. Mobile response only. Stay light, stay fast, and don't engage unless you've got a clear shot." The replies came in scattered, but affirmative. Across the fleet, the pieces started shifting. Mining rigs repositioned, drone wings recalibrated. Even the few remaining station defense platforms realigned their turrets for cross-grid coverage. On Arg's screen, the simulation map of their defense net started to tighten. Lines pulled in, gaps narrowed. It wasn't pretty, but it might hold. The next warning came 30 seconds later. Helix lead elements entering primary firing range. Arg wrapped both hands around the Widow's control yokes, flexing his fingers once before locking in. "All right," he breathed. Let's see if we can make them regret coming back for round 2. The first Helix missile screamed towards the station, and Vega Point answered with every gun she had. Chapter 8. The Minefield. The first Helix warheads lit up space between Vega Point and the Widow like a false sunrise. Missile trails stitched glowing arcs across Arg's canopy as the Widow banked hard, rolling low beneath a flak burst that scattered glowing debris across his forward shields. His consoles howled with warning signals, but he tuned them out. They were background noise now, like breathing, like heartbeat, like the crackle of static from an old radio, like the faint memory of Tara laughing over some long, forgotten joke. Her voice, uninvited but vivid. "You always wait until the last second, Arg." He shoved the thought down and focused on the fight. "Pulse mines! Detonate! Now!" Arg shouted across the comms. The tactical overlay, 7 bright icons flared gold as the first wave of buried belt explosives detonated. The results were immediate. Helix's lead strike group hit the minefield at full burn. The first 3 frigates caught the pulse burst dead center, their shields flickering and collapsing as EMP waves surged throughout their systems. One gunship spun out of control, venting atmosphere as its port side tore open like paper. Another went dark. No lights, no power, drifting dead through the kill zone. Arg grinned despite himself. It wouldn't stop their whole wave, but it cracked their front line wide open. "Belt fleet, target the gap," he shouted. "Drive it wider." Across the defense grid, miners and haulers surged forward. Plasma cutters mounted on old ore rigs burned holes through Helix hulls. Jury-rigged missile racks on survey ships fired in ragged, uneven volleys. A Helix corvette broke through the debris cloud on Arg 6. The Widow's proximity alarm screamed. Too close. Arg reacted without thinking, dumping lateral thrusters and spun the ship into a tight snap roll, bringing his ventral railgun to bear. One shot. The corvette's cockpit cracked like glass under pressure. It spun away, leaving a smear of frozen vapor and disintegrating bulkheads. Arg's hand stayed on the controls, steady, but his breath caught for a beat. Because just for a split second, caught in the smoke and light, he thought he'd seen her. Tara. Sitting in the empty co-pilot seat, just looking at him. Calm, unafraid. Her hair pulled back like she always wore it when they worked in orbital salvage jobs. That small half-smile she used to give him when she was watching him fix something with too much risk and too little planning. He blinked. Gone. Of course she was gone. Arg shoved the image aside and banked hard towards a new target vector. "Rel," he barked into comms. "Status on the station's power grid." Rel's voice came back, half static, half panic. "Holding, but they're dropping fast. They're hammering the outer shield generators. If we lose grid sections 3, the main deck's exposed." Arg's eyes flicked to the tactical map. The next Helix wave was already adjusting, pushing hard on the flank near grid 3. A thin defensive line stood between them and the open access to Vega Point's hull. And that line was breaking. Arg scanned his readouts. Half the belt fleet was still tied up, fending off stragglers from the first engagement. Had to be maybe 6 ships, close enough to reposition. Not enough. Not by a long shot. His stomach twisted. Options flickered through his mind, most of them bad. His knuckles whitened on the control yokes. Tara's voice drifted back, soft, almost playful this time. "You're going to try it anyway, aren't you?" He smiled bitterly. "Yeah," he whispered. "Guess I am." Arg switched to fleet command channel. "Widow to all fast movers still online," he said, loud and clear. "Grid 3's about to fall. I need a hard bird intercept. We're going to punch through and draw fire off the station." Several voices clicked back in confirmation. The Widow's engines howled as Arg moved the throttle wide open. G-forces pinned him deep into his seat as the ship accelerated, burning across the defense grid like a comet. Helix gunships and drone wings shifted instantly to intercept, but Arg was faster. Slower than he used to be, slower than his body wanted, but still fast enough. Railgun fire stitched past his port side. Arg juked left, then dove under a debris cluster, flipping weapons hot. "Let's make some noise," he muttered. The Widow's guns roared, tearing through a Helix scout craft and winging another. 2 more belt rigs followed him in, cutting perpendicular attack runs that forced the Helix wing to split. The pressure on Grid 3 lightened, just enough. Rel's voice came back to the cons. "Grid 3 shield holding. We're stabilizing." Arg grinned, even as another proximity alarm flashed red across his board. Missile lock. Too close to outmaneuver. He dumped countermeasures and threw the Widow into a side roll, but the impact still clipped his aft section. The ship jolted, alarm screaming in his ears. Hydraulic fluid pressure dropped by 20%. Structural integrity warning. Power bleed in the starboard reactor conduit. Arg hissed in frustration but kept flying. No time to stop. No time to think. Just keep moving. Keep pushing. Somewhere deep in his mind, Tara's voice echoed again. Not full memory this time. Just a simple, quiet thing she used to say when he'd pushed too hard during salvage run. "Come back in one piece, you stubborn fool." Arg smiled through gritted teeth. "No promises," he whispered. He banked the Widow back toward the heart of the fight, weapons still hot, sensors screaming, and every nerve in his body telling him, survive. Because the battle wasn't done. Not yet. Chapter 9. Through the Fire. The Dust Widow wasn't built for this. Her engine strained, pushing well past safe output. Heat levels on the core readouts blinked from yellow to red to solid crimson. Structural warnings stacked one after another across Arg's HUD like falling dominoes. But she flew. By sheer force of will and neglect-defying engineering, she flew. Arg shoved the throttle open again, throwing the Widow into an inverted snap turn that rattled every bolt along the spine. The starfield spun sideways. Missile trails crisscrossed past his cockpit as 3 Helix interceptors tried to box him in from multiple vectors. He kept his breathing shallow, focused, steady. "Come on, come on." He cut main thrust for half a second, let the Widow drift, then fired starboard retros at full blast, slingshotting himself out of their firing arcs. The maneuver tore 2 of his starboard maneuvering nozzles clean off. Didn't matter. He rolled low, bringing his dorsal railgun around and let loose with a full double burst. The first interceptor took the shot mid-engine. Fire bloomed across its aft section before the whole frame broke apart like brittle glass under pressure. The second one peeled off. The third stayed with him. Arg's targeting reticle blinked red. Lock failure. Target too close for railgun effectiveness. Fine. He switched to point defense coil guns, firing blind towards his rear vector. The round shredded the Helix craft's cockpit. A mist of vapor and debris marked the kill. "Still breathing," Arg muttered, forcing air back into his lungs. Just barely. The Widow's hull integrity dropped another 3%. Power flickered on 2 decks. A slow coolant leak bleed pressure from the reactor manifold. And worse, Arg could feel it in his own body. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from raw exhaustion. Neck muscles tight enough to send stabbing pain down his spine. His chest burned with every breath. He risked a glance at the life support panel. CO2 scrubbers were holding, but just barely. "Too old for this," he whispered, wiping sweat from his forehead with a shaking hand. The next tactical update scrolled across his display. Helix reinforcement group breaking through Sector 5 defense grid. Vega Point hull compromised at decking array 2. Secondary reactor offline. Arg's stomach tightened. He flipped to fleet command. "Where's Harrow?" he demanded. Static. Then Harrow's voice, thick with strain. "Tied up near the south flank. Got 3 Helix gunships pinning us down." Arg didn't have time to wait. The breach at docking array 2 meant Helix boarding parties were inbound. Once Helix put boots inside Vega Point, it was over. Arg keyed a full burn ignition sequence. The Widow's reactor roared, power surging through her battered frame. The remaining functional engines flared hot enough to light up his entire rear display in glare warnings. "No calculations," Arg muttered. "Just instinct." He drove the Widow headlong toward the breach point. Helix frigates moved to intercept, but Arg was faster. A cluster of automated defense drones closed in on his trajectory. Arg armed his last 2 anti-ship missiles, flipped their targeting protocols to proximity detonation, and fired both at once. The drones scattered, but not fast enough. The blast opened a corridor through the debris cloud. Arg shot through, straight into the heart of Helix advance wing. Incoming fire from all sides. Too much. Way too much. The Widow's shields collapsed with a bright flare. Armor plating peeled back along her belly. Fluid and vapor vented from her midsection. Still, he kept going. Through the static and flicker of overloaded sensors, Arg locked onto the closest Helix boarding craft burning toward Vega Point's compromised docking bay. Not today. He armed the Widow's emergency reactor bleed-off, a last resort maneuver meant for evasive scrambles, not ramming runs. Arg hit the release. Superheat of plasma vented out of the window's rear thrusters like a tidal wave. The sudden burst of speed slammed him back into the pilot's seat so hard he thought his ribs cracked. The Widow hit the boarding craft like a hammer. Impact alarm screamed. Arg barely had time to throw power into hull dampeners before the entire forward bulkhead crumpled inward. The Helix boarding ship folded under the force. Both vessels tumbled end over end across open space, spinning toward the upper debris fields above Vega Point. Arg struggled for breath, fought the black creeping at the edge of his vision. When the Widow stabilized, all that remained of the Helix boarding wing was broken wreckage and burning fragments. Silence returned to the cockpit, save for the constant warning chimes of critical system failures. Arg let out a breath that sounded like a curse, but wasn't. Somewhere deep inside his mind, Tara's voice floated up again, low, warm, amused. You never did know when to quit. He closed his eyes for half a second, allowed himself the smallest smile. Guess I didn't, he whispered. Then he opened his eyes, checked for remaining thruster control, and turned the Widow back towards the station. The fight wasn't done. Not yet. Chapter 10. Last light, last shot. The Dust Widow limped back toward Vega Point like a wounded animal refusing to fall. Hull integrity warnings flashed non-stop. The forward sensor mast was gone, blown clean off during the impact with the Helix boarding ship. At least 2 of the external comm relays were toast, forcing Arg to run everything through backup short-range frequencies. But somehow, she still flew. Arg kept the Widow steady, hands tight on the yokes, flicking between what few operational sensors he had left. The tactical feed painted an ugly picture. Helix's second wave hadn't broken, just stalled. Their remaining frigates were now regrouping, flanking wide now, looking to encircle Vega Point and cut off any chance of retreat or reinforcement. Their drone wings, what was left of them after the minefield ambush, had reformed into tight hunter-killer formation sweeping along the defense grid's blind spots. And the worst part? Another Helix destroyer had just jumped in from deep orbit, sliding into position behind the lead formation. Arg closed his eyes for one long, bitter second. His heart thudded in his chest, slow and heavy. Every instinct told him the next hit would be the one that finished him. Tara's voice came again, unbidden, uninvited, but sharp as ever in the back of his mind. If you're waiting for the perfect conditions, you're already too late. Arg opened his eyes. She was right. Always was. He pulled up the fleet-wide commnet. Attention all built ships, all defensive assets, anyone still flying and not dead or burning. This is Void Miner. He paused for a breath, steadying his voice. You've all seen the state of things. You know what's coming next. We've held them off longer than anyone thought possible. But this next push, this is it. The commnet crackled as ships across the grid listened. Miners, haulers, retrofit gunboats, scavenger tugs, and survey craft, all of them running on borrowed time and half-dead systems. Arg leaned forward. We don't hold this line, Vega Point falls. And if Vega Point falls, so does every free station, every rockhopper claim, every solo rig in the belt. He switched to local short-range broadcast, extending the message beyond the fleet net. If you're still breathing, still flying, now's the time to fight like your life depends on it. Because it does. He punched in a final transmission override, pushing the signal through the battered grid relays, station towers, and every ship within range. Form up. Right now, I'm transmitting new rally coordinates. He uploaded a fresh vector, an improvised assault pattern that brought the remaining belt ships together at a converging point just outside the station's main shield perimeter. A spearhead formation. Messy, underpowered, full of gaps. But it would focus what they had left. Harrow's voice came through almost immediately, breathless but steady. You're leading the charge this time, I assume? Wouldn't miss it, Arg said. Figures. Rel's voice followed, tight and controlled. I've got the station's remaining point defense turrets rerouted to cover your left flank. It's not much, but it's something. Good enough, Arg replied. The Widow's engines whined as he fed more power into the drives, pushing her battered frame back into forward thrust. On his tactical feed, the belt ships shifted. Arg could see them forming up, mining rigs with plasma cutters primed as weapons, prospecting ships with retrofitted autocannons, cargo freighters jury-rigged with external missile pods. Not a fleet by any real standard, but enough. If they hit hard and fast, they had one chance. Punch straight through the Helix formations, scatter their lead elements, and force them to pull back for regrouping. Arg pulled what little data he had left from the Widow's fried sensors and calculated their burn vectors. It wasn't pretty. All right, Belt, he whispered, voice low and even. One more time. He keyed the thrust and opened all fleet comms. All ships burn at my mark. The countdown started. 3, 2, 1. Mark! The Belt fleet surged forward. Engines screamed, hulls groaned under acceleration stress. Plasma and kinetic rounds filled the void. Arg kept the Widow dead center in the formation, driving her forward with every ounce of power left in the reactor. The Helix fleet responding, reacted fast, vectoring interceptors and drone wings to meet the charge. But Arg was already moving. He twisted the Widow under the first wave of enemy fire, ducked behind the burning hull of a wrecked Helix gunship, and came up firing, railguns slamming rounds into a lead frigate sensor array. Another belt ship, a converted ore tug, rammed full force into a Helix drone carrier, splitting it open like a cracked egg. A cheer broke across the comms. Arg barely heard it. His focus narrowed, breath slowing as he tracked the remaining threats. He saw the third Helix frigate shift positions just a little too late and pushed the Widow straight through the gap it left behind. His targeting reticle blinked green, firing solution achieved. Let's see if you're as tough as you look, Arg muttered. He squeezed the trigger. The Widow's railgun thundered one last time. The shot connected. The Helix frigate broke apart at the seams, disappearing into a cloud of superheated gas and debris. Arg's hood flared with impact warnings, secondary explosions rippling through the enemy formation. The Belt fleet drove deeper, past the point of no return. Vega Point's outer shield flaring as surviving defense turrets poured suppressing fire into the chaos. And at that moment, something shifted. For the first time since the battle began, the Helix fleet hesitated. A ripple of uncertainty moved through their lines. Arg saw it, felt it. They weren't ready for this level of resistance. Not from miners, not from haulers, not from people who weren't supposed to fight back. Arg let out a slow breath. They weren't beaten yet. But for the first time, it felt like they could win. Chapter 11. Aftermath. Silence fell over the Belt. Not total silence. Not yet. But something close. The steady hammer of railgun fire tapered off. The swarm of incoming Helix drones thinned, then vanished entirely from Arg's tactical display. The last few enemy frigates burned hard for retreat vectors, engines glowing bright as they accelerated away from Vega Point's perimeter. For several long seconds, Arg didn't trust it. He kept the Widow's guns hot, sensors active, shields, what remained of them, raised. His hands hovered above the manual control toggles, waiting for the inevitable next wave. But it didn't come. The Helix fleet was pulling back, disengaging, running. Across the comms, cheers erupted from every belt ship still online. Harrow's voice came first, rough and worn but loud. "They're pulling out. Holy void, they're running." A dozen more voices followed, miners shouting, laughing, some still cursing into the mic, others just letting out long, shaky breaths they'd been holding for the past hour. Arg slumped back in his seat, every part of him aching. His vision swam at the edges, the pain in his ribs, from the earlier G-stress, deepened with every breath. His fingers shook over the console. Blood oozed from a cut above his eyebrow, unnoticed until now. He let the widow drift. Warning lights blinked across the cockpit, but for once, he didn't care. They were alive. Vega Point still stood. Barely, but it stood. Arg tapped his console, pulling up external feeds. The station's hull showed ugly scars, entire docking arms sheared off, plating peeled back like torn metal skin. Fires burned inside the lower deck windows. Escape pods drifted like scattered seed around the station's gravity well. But the lights were still on. The station hadn't gone dark. A flicker in his peripheral vision caught Ark's attention. For just a second, in the reflection off the cracked canopy glass, he thought he saw her again. Tara, sitting in the empty co-pilot seat, expression soft, watching him. Ark blinked, and she was gone. The ache in his chest deepened, not from injury, but from memory. "I know," he murmured to the empty cockpit. "You'd tell me I'm being reckless." He smiled, despite himself. It didn't last long. The fleet net chimed again. This time it wasn't a cheer or a status report. It was Harrow, voice low, serious. "Arg, you're going to want to see this." Arg pushed himself upright, ignoring the protest from every sore muscle in his body. "Go ahead." Harrow's data feed appeared across the widow's cracked secondary display. Arg's stomach twisted. A long-range sensor ping, taken from a deep orbital relay station still operational near Saturn, showed multiple Helix fleet movements across the belt. Not just here, not just Vega Point. Mobilization patterns, full scale. This hadn't been an isolated engagement, not some limited strike force. Helix was moving assets across multiple sectors. Station blockades, trade route interdictions, resource grabs. And in the middle of it all, a flagged priority directive from Helix Corporate Command. Operation Belt Compliance, Phase 2 initiate. Ark's throat went dry. "Phase 2? He said aloud, reading the text. "They're escalating." Rel's voice came next, patched through what was left of station control. "We've been intercepting partial comms from Helix High Command," he said grimly. "They're calling this engagement a security breach, classifying us as hostile, and from the sound of it, they're not planning to stop with Vega Point." Ark's mind raced, putting the pieces together. They weren't just defending a station anymore. This was the opening shot of something much larger. His actions, running the blockade at Kovac, breaking through Helix lines, uploading that video that rallied half the belt to Vega Point, had lit the fuse. And now the whole belt was about to burn. He pushed the thought aside and keyed in a final command. "Open a channel," he said. "Full range broadcast, fleet-wide, public access." Rel hesitated on the other end. "Are you sure? You're not exactly on your feet, Arg." "I'm sure." The widow's external comms, held together with emergency patchwork and more hope than hardware, crackled to life. Arg took a slow breath. "This is Void Miner," he said, voice low but steady. "To anyone still listening, anyone still out there, you've seen what's coming. You know what's next." He paused, staring through the cracked canopy towards the distant stars. "They came here thinking we'd fold, thinking we'd scatter, thinking we'd kneel." His voice sharpened. "But we didn't." Another breath. "So if Helix wants a war with the free people of the belt," Ark's hands tightened on the controls, "then the free people of the belt declare war on them." Behind him, scattered ships cheered. Pilots raised fists to the void. Some shouted his name. Others just stood silent, grim, ready. The feed captured it all. Faces from every kind of ship and station across the sector. Miners, salvagers, traders, even station dockhands, nodding, raising helmets, slapping bulkheads in solidarity. Arg let the moment hang. Then, with a tired but defiant half-smile, he gave one final sign-off. Voidmire, out. The feed cut, and the belt prepared for war. Chapter 12. Picking up the pieces. The Dust Widow drifted powerless, caught in the slow embrace of orbital decay. Arg sat strapped in the pilot's seat, head tilted back against the cold support cushion. The cockpit felt smaller now, not from damage, though there was plenty of that, but from silence. The kind of quiet that settled in after too much adrenaline, too much noise, too much fighting. The main reactor had finally given up the ghost 4 minutes after the battle ended. The Widow's lights dimmed. Her engines went dark, and her battered system slipped into survival mode. Only the emergency backup kept life support running, and even that was running on a ticking clock. The console still blinked with critical warnings. Reactor failure. Structural integrity below 30%. Life support 2 hours remaining. Communications limited to local burst frequency. Arg reached for the manual override, dropped the interior temperature by another 5 degrees to conserve power, and let out a long, uneven breath as the cold bit into his skin. He'd been cold before. Out here, it was part of life. Didn't mean he liked it. Outside, Vega Point filled the forward canopy, scarred, battered, but standing. Columns of smoke vented from half a dozen hull breaches along the station's lower decks. 2 docking arms were missing entirely, torn free like snap bones. Fires burned along Grid 4's outer superstructure, the oxygen leaks feeding a blue-white flame that flickered like a dying signal flare. And the belt ships, what was left of them, they drifted like ghosts, scattered across the debris field. Some still burned, others just floated, dark and empty, with no life signs and no heat signatures. Casualty list on Arg's cracked secondary display scrolled on a loop. Too many red indicators, too many ships listed as unknown or no response. His stomach twisted as he scanned through names. Miners he'd worked with on jobs years ago. Pilots he'd seen in trade lanes. People who answered the call because of him. His throat tightened. He flicked the display off before he could finish the next update. The comm crackled in his ear, scratchy, weak, but there. Widow, this is Vega Point. Control, come in. Arg keyed his mic. Go ahead, Rel. His voice came back hoarse, full of static and exhaustion. Arg, we've got you on scan, sending a tug to pull you in. Copy that. He exhaled and glanced at the remaining readouts. Hydraulic pressure, low. Fuel reserves, near zero. Shield arrays, flatlined. Reactor core temp, dropping fast. It was a miracle the ship hadn't come apart at the seams. The console's power flickered again. Arg reached out, laid a hand flat on the cold metal casing. Hold together a little longer, girl, he muttered. Almost home. Home. The word tasted foreign in his mouth. For 9 years, the Dust Widow had been his home. But now, with Vega Point on the edge of ruin, with Helix regrouping in the dark, nowhere felt safe anymore. Not Earth, not the Belt, not even here. The tug finally lashed into the Widow's battered forward clamps. Arg felt the slightest jolt as magnetic locks engaged, pulling him into slow, guided motions back toward the station's primary docking bay. Light from the station's emergency beacons washed across his canopy, red, then amber, then red again. Warning colors. Danger. Damage. Death. The voices on comm started growing louder as more ships checked in. Harrow's voice came through next, rough, but alive. Voidminer, this is Harrow. You breathing in there? Barely. You saved a lot of asses today, you know that? Arg managed a dry laugh. Didn't do it alone. No, but none of this happened if you hadn't pulled us together. Arg didn't reply, partially because he didn't know what to say, partly because the comms crackled again with another transmission. This time Rel. His voice was lower now, serious. Arg, you need to know, we've been monitoring Helix comms. They're falling back, but this wasn't the end. Arg rubbed his eyes with the back of a shaking hand. Didn't figure it would be. There's more coming. They're calling this whole engagement a security breach, classifying Vega Point as a hostile territory now. Arg's heart sank. That was corporate language for escalation orders. Of course they are, he muttered. Rel kept going. We're picking up long-range mobilization patterns, multiple Helix strike groups moving across different sectors. They're pushing fleet assets toward known belt settlements, resource hubs, shipping lanes. Arg stared at the cracked canopy, jaws tightening. They weren't coming for Vega Point anymore. They were coming for the belt. For everyone. Another flicker on his sensor array caught his eye. Incoming private message stream. He opened it, then blinked in disbelief. The sender list wasn't one or two messages. It was dozens, then hundreds. His channel feed, Void Miner, was lighting up like a supernova. Independent haulers, prospectors, miners from across the outer colonies, station dwellers, free merchants, all sending the same kind of message. Saw the feed. We're with you. Where do you need us? Helix doesn't own the belt. Arg scrolled through the flood of incoming support. Video clips came next. Crews standing next to battered mining rigs, holding up hands, written signs. Solo pilots giving silent nods to the camera. Families inside airlock corridors holding up their kids in front of the consoles, making the old belt solidarity hand signal. Fist over heart, two fingers raised. It kept coming. His stomach knotted at the scale of it hit him. He started this. And now, the whole belt was waking up. Harrow's voice chimed back in, half laughing, half stunned. You seeing this, Void Miner? Looks like you've got yourself a movement. Arg let out a long, shaky breath. Outside, Vega Point's battered docking bay loomed closer, floodlights washing over the Widow's scarred hull. Tugs maneuvered, med crews rushed across the platform, welding teams already crawling across damaged station supports. A war was coming, and like it or not, he was in the center of it. As the final tug pulled the Widow into final docking alignment, Arg sat back, stared at the station, and let the realization settle like a weight in his chest. Tara's voice, soft and ghost-like, drifted through the quiet again. You're in this now, Arg. No backing out. He smiled faintly. I know, he whispered. The max locks engaged with a final, deep funk. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Arg let himself close his eyes, just for a moment. Chapter 13. Feet on Steel. The docking clamps engaged with a bone deep shudder that rattled through the Dust Widow's battered frame. Arg felt it all the way up through his boots. The vibration was long, low and tired, like the ship herself was sighing after the fight she shouldn't have survived. The Widow had nothing left. Reactor offline, main engines cold, hull integrity barely holding above critical failure. Auxiliary life support was the only thing keeping Arg breathing, and even that wouldn't last much longer. Arg sat motionless for a few seconds, strapped in his seat, staring through the cracked canopy at the battered face of Vega Point. It looked worse up close. Two of the station's primary docking arms were gone, reduced to twisted wreckage still smoldering in zero-G. Fires burned along the outer decks where oxygen hadn't yet vented to vacuum. Flashes from repair drones flickered along the station's underbelly like fireflies scrambling to patch bleeding wounds. Inside the Widow, the cold settled in deeper. Arg finally reached for his harness release, wincing as he pulled free. Every muscle in his body protested. His ribs screamed from the earlier G-strain. His hands shook from fatigue and blood loss. The dried cut above his eye pulled tight as he moved, leaving flakes of darkened red on his fingertips. For a second, he stayed seated, just breathing in the thin, recycled air. Tara's voice drifted back from some old corner of memory. You can sit there and sulk, or you can stand up and do something about it. Your choice. Arg let out a dry, tired laugh. Yeah, I know, he muttered. He pushed himself upright, grabbed his flight jacket off the rail, and pulled it on with slow, deliberate movements. The airlock controls flickered as he hit the manual override, then hissed open with sluggish hydraulics. The cold hit him first. The station's emergency climate controls were still struggling to maintain stable temperature gradients. The second thing that hit him was the smell. Burnt wiring, melted composites, fuel, blood, a chemical cocktail of violence and survival. Arg stepped out onto the station's dock. Vega Point's main bay was barely holding together. Wounded lay in neat rows along the far wall, tended by overworked med crews. Station engineers crawled over broken support beams, welding emergency braces into place. Power conduits arced occasional sparks overhead. Then more than one bulkhead showed evidence of recent patch jobs with scrap plating and weld foam. The people looked just as wrecked as the station. Exhausted faces, bloodied hands, hollow eyes, but they were alive. Arg moved down the gantry, boots ringing against the deck plates. Heads turned as he passed. Some people gave him small nods. Others just stared, recognition dawning, like they were realizing all at once that the man walking past them was the one who kicked off this whole damn thing off. By the time he reached the far end of the dock, a familiar voice called out from behind a row of field med carts. Void miner? Arg turned. Rel. The man looked as bad as Arg felt. His dark beard was caked with dust and soot, and a rough pressure bandage wrapped tight around his left forearm where shrapnel had torn through muscle. His station jumpsuit was half burned at the collar, the sleeves rolled up as if he didn't have time or patience for medical protocol. But his eyes, those were steady. Figured you'd crawl out of that wreck sooner or later, Rel said, making his way over. Didn't have much choice, Arg answered. Tug woke me up. Rel gave him a light grin. Lucky we had one to spare. Arg gestured broadly at the ruined dock. This could have gone worse. Could have gone a lot worse. Thanks to you. Arg shook his head. Wasn't just me. Rel's grin faded, replaced by something heavier. Maybe not, but you were the one who got these people moving. Before Arg could answer, Rel nodded toward a lower service corridor leading off the main dock. Come on. Harrow set up shop down in Grid 3. Most of what's left of the captains and station leads are there. Arg followed him, weaving past more repair crews and medical triage units. As they moved deeper into the station, the true scale of damage became harder to ignore. Entire sections of hallway were dark. Emergency bulkheads sealed off blown-out compartments. The occasional body bag, zipped and waiting for transport, lined the edges of the floor near the airlock junction. No ceremony, no time for grief. Just survival. The command post was a converted maintenance bay, lit by portable flood lamps and half-powered holo projectors. A large central table showed a sector map overlaid with fleet movements, comm intercepts, and projected Helix troop positions. Harrow stood at the far end, still in his flight gear, his face lined with exhaustion but focused. Several other ship captains and station op leads crowded around the table, grimy, battered, but alive. When Arg entered the room, quieted for a beat. Harrow looked up, gave him a sharp nod. Glad to see you walking, Void Miner. Not for long if I don't sit down soon, Arg said, lowering himself into a crate near the wall. Rel stepped up beside Harrow, dropping a cracked data pad onto the table. Here's the sit rep, he said. 17 ships still spaceworthy. 10 more could fly with patch jobs. 30 if we count everything that can leave dock without falling apart. Harrow gestured to the map. Helix hasn't stopped moving. Their fallback wasn't a retreat. It was a reposition. We've got reports of mobilizations near the Jovian corridor. Blockades going up along outer resource lanes. Another captain, an older miner from Deshay, spoke up from the far corner. They're boxing us in, cutting off supplies, standard corporate squeeze play. Except this time, Rel said grimly. They're doing it with gunships. Arg rubbed his face with both hands, pushing back the fog of fatigue. And reinforcements? He asked. Rel pulled up another overlay. Funny thing about that, he said, tone dark, but with the faintest thread of hope. Your channel's gone viral. Your last broadcast? Half the belt's seen it already. We've got independents pinging us from far as Titan Gate. Freighters, prospectors, even a few rogue ex-security ships looking to settle old scores with Helix. Harrow smirked. You got yourself a following, Arg. Arg let out a hollow laugh. That was never the plan. Doesn't matter, Rel said. It's happening. Arg stood slowly, moving towards the hollow map, staring at the sea of red markers. His mind churned, half strategy, half instinct. Every move Helix made, every vector they'd used in today's fight, it all replayed in the back of his skull. Terra's voice whispered again, soft, knowing. You're in it now. No walking away from this one. He rested both hands on the edge of the table, taking a slow breath. All right, he said, voice low but steady. First things first, we get the Widow flight capable again. Then we start coordinating the outer stations, trade routes, resupply points, early warning beacons. Harrow nodded. Already on it. And after that, Arg's eyes narrowed, scanning the map. We hit them before they hit us. The room went quiet. Rel clacked a slow, tired grin. You're serious? Dead serious. Arg turned towards the others. No more running, no more hiding. They wanted a war. He gestured towards the shattered walls of Vega Point. And they just got one. Chapter 14. Broadcast to the Belt. The Dust Widow's cockpit was a mess of exposed wiring, half-installed systems, and jury-rigged power feeds. The main lighting was still shot, leaving the entire flight deck lit only by a cold flicker of emergency strips and a few portable work lamps clamped to the overhead rails. Arg sat in a pilot's chair anyway. The bruises along his ribs throbbed with every breath. His left shoulder screamed when he moved wrong. Probably a hairline fracture. There was dried blood along the side of his face, flaked and crusted, but he hadn't found time, or the will, to clean it off yet. Outside the forward canopy, Vega Point's dock crew scrambled like ants over the Widow's battered hull. Sparks burst as welders patched fresh armor plating across the starboard side. Fuel lines hung loose, waiting for reconnection. Somewhere below, Rel's engineering teams were dragging replacement reactor components into position. The Widow wasn't just getting fixed. She was being reborn. But Arg couldn't focus on that right now. Not yet. He reached over and thumbed the external mic control on his console. The camera node above the primary display sputtered to life, flickering twice before finally settling on a grainy but stable feed. The indicator light glowed green. Recording started. Arg sat there for a few long seconds, silent, staring. His throat felt tight. Talking to empty space was something he'd gotten good at over the years. Rambling about drilling patterns, ore yields, equipment failures. Hell, he'd built a whole channel on it. But this wasn't the same. Finally, he let out a slow breath and leaned toward the mic. Void Miner Channel. Arg here. The words felt heavier than usual. If you're watching this, you've probably already heard or seen the footage, or maybe you're just hearing rumors filtering through unsecured relays. He glanced away for a second, organizing the next thought. I'm not dead. The smallest smirk twitched at the corner of his mouth. Not yet, anyway. The smirk faded just as fast. This isn't going to be my usual feed. No ore analysis, no EVA patch jobs, no hull stress charts or power flow diagnostics. He took a slow breath and rested his elbows on his knees. This is something else. Arg let the next word settle. For 9 years, I stayed out of things. Came out to the belt because Earth had too many ghosts. His gaze darkened. Some of you know, some don't. My wife, Tara, died back home. Glioblastoma. Fast and mean. Left me with a one-way ticket to nowhere. Bought this ship. Retroed her from scrap. Named her the Dust Widow. And I spent the next decade doing what I do best. Working alone and not looking back. He let the memory hang in the air like static. For a while, that was enough. Arg gestured broadly to the cockpit around him. This channel started as a way to keep my head on straight. Talking to nobody. Out in the dark. Just so I didn't start talking to the walls instead. A breath. Then the tone shifted. But things changed. His hands curled tightly into fists. First came Ceres Station. He leaned back, voice dropping. If you were watching the feed back then, you already know. If you weren't, let me spell it out. We found something out there. Something black, living, hungry. I don't pretend to understand what it was. I just know it killed good people and left scars in ways I still don't know how to explain. He rubbed at the back of his neck, the ghost of tension creeping down his spine at the memory. I should have known that was a warning shot. Ark's jaw tightened. Then, Kovac Station. The words came harder now. Just trying to sell ore. That's all it was supposed to be. But Helix had other plans. Blockades, price manipulation, armed security boarding civilian ships like they were criminals for trying to make a living. His voice darkened. I broke their line, ran the blockade. Thought maybe that'd be the end of it. A bitter laugh escaped him. Guess not. He stood now, shifting the camera angle with him as he paced towards the rear of the cockpit, where half the Widow's engine access panels were still hanging open. They followed us here, to Vega Point. Arg gestured towards the cracked canopy and the twisted station infrastructure outside. Helix didn't just blockade this time. They invaded, sent in gunships, boarding teams. They opened fire on civilian docks, hospitals, housing sectors. His throat caught, but he pushed through. People died. The words felt like sandpaper in his throat. Miners, station workers, kids. He let that hang for a long beat. Somehow, against all odds, we held them back. Arg gave a tired nod towards the half-functional systems around him. We fought with whatever we had. Old mining lasers turned into point defense. Cargo haulers retrofitted with scrap armor. EVO welders doubling as cutting torches for boarding teams. He moved closer to the lens, filling the frame with tired eyes and a set jaw. And now, a breath. The belt has a choice. The feed captured the flicker of incoming comm pings, starting to roll across his peripheral display. Notifications flooded in. Text feeds, voice snippets, even live video links from other ships tuning in. Arg ignored them for the moment. This isn't just about Vega Point anymore, or Kovac, or Ceres. This is about the belt itself. He let the words grow sharper. For every miner out there, every hauler captain, every rig operator who's ever gotten stiffed by station contracts, every free pilot who's patched a crack hole with their last roll of sealant just to make one more jump. His voice dropped lower, slow and deliberate. If Helix wants a war with the free people of the belt, then the free people of the belt are gonna give them one. He pointed straight at the lens. I'm not here to tell you what to do. A flicker of Tara's voice crossed his mind, soft but insistent. But you're going to anyway, aren't you? Arg pushed forward. You want to run? Run. You want to hide? Hide. No shame in survival. But if you've got a ship that flies, if you've got a tool that cuts, if you've got fuel in your tanks and a fire in your gut. His voice cracked slightly, but it only made the next words land harder. Then it's time to stand up. Arg took one last steadying breath. We're now rebuilding here. Dust Widow's getting new drives, a stronger hull, better firepower. She'll fly again. And when she does, I'm not running anymore. He raised his hand in the old belt signal, fist to chest. 2 fingers pointed skyward. Stay sharp. Stay angry. Stay alive. The final words came low, but steady. Void Miner out. And with that, Arg reached out and killed the feed. The little green light on the console dimmed. But the notifications, they didn't stop. They kept coming. Hundreds. Then thousands. Across the belt, people were waking up. Chapter 15. The Gathering Storm. Arg stood at the edge of the hangar bay, arms crossed over his chest, watching the battered parade of ships arrive one after another. The docking lanes at Vega Point, what was left of them, were overflowing. Every 20 minutes, another ship eased in. Some were old prospector rigs with paint peeling from years of solar exposure. Others were converted freighters, barely spaceworthy, but loaded with attitude and improvised weapon mounts. A few had clear signs of combat scars. Patched hull breaches, scorched plating, and mismatched replacement panels. But they all had one thing in common. They came when Arg called. The feed from his Void Miner channel had gone viral faster than he thought possible. Within hours of his broadcast, subspace relays lit up from every corner of the belt. Solo miners, independent haulers, outpost security ships that had gone private after corporate layoffs. Even a few old wrecks that looked like they'd been pulled out of the scrapyards just for this. They weren't a fleet. Not yet. But it was a start. Arg leaned against the support column, biting back a wince as his cracked ribs protested the movement. He watched as one of Vega Point's surviving dock crews guided a squat, triple-engine hauler down into Pad 12. The ship's exterior was covered in spray-painted slogans, some of them less polite about Helix. A voice cracked from his comm piece. Void Miner? You seeing this? It was Rel, somewhere down near the auxiliary docks. Hard to miss, Arg answered. Rel gave a dry chuckle. We're going to need bigger docks, or smaller egos. Arg smiled thinly. Probably both. Before he could say more, another comm ping lit up. Harrow's voice this time. Arg, Central Ops meeting in 15, Grid 3. Bring your notes. Notes. Sure. Arg glanced back at the Dust Widow. The work crews were still crawling over her hull like ants on a carcass. Panels open, reactor shielding mid-install. The new engine modules sat on a cargo trolley nearby waiting for final replacement. Replacement AI cores, more robust, less temperamental than the last generation, were being tested in the ship's rear bay. She wasn't ready yet, but soon. The command room was barely holding together. Converted from an old storage bay, it still smelled like grease and hydraulic fluid. Hollow projectors flickered against dented walls, showing real-time overlays of the sector. Red lines, blue lines, clustered heat blooms where ships were massing. The room buzzed with noise. Captains shouting updates, engineers rattling off supply shortages, comm officers trying to keep peace with incoming transmissions. Arg pushed through the crowd. Harrow stood near the central display table, a half-empty coffee bulb in one hand, dark circles under his eyes. Rel was there too, scrolling through ship registries on a cracked datapad. A few others stood clustered around. Deshay, the grizzled old mining baron from Titan Gate. Keelan, captain of a converted salvage tug with more rust than armor, and even a handful of younger pilots who'd come in on converted ore hoppers. Harrow looked up as Arg approached. Glad you made it, Harrow said. You're late. Arg snorted. I was admiring the parking lot. That got a few tired laughs from the room. Harrow gestured toward the display. We've got just under 70 ships now. Of those, maybe 40 are combat ready. The rest, transports, tenders, unarmed survey rigs, anything with a working drive and comms. Fuel? Arg asked. Running low already. Vega's reserves were never meant for this many ships, Harrow mentioned towards another set of data overlays. Ammo's worst. Most of the people brought whatever they had on hand. Some didn't even have functional weapons yet. Arg nodded slowly, taking it all in. And Helix? He asked. Rill answered this time, tapping his pad to update the projections. They're massing along the Jovian corridor, 5 confirmed squadrons, 2 heavy cruisers, at least a dozen support frigates, plus logistics supports feeding them out from Mars orbit. A low whistle passed through the room. Arg rubbed his face with both hands. So, they're not just sending a message. They're preparing for a full sweep. Looks that way, Harrow said grimly. Arg stared at the hollow map for a long moment. The red markers, Helix signatures, pulsed like an infected wound spreading across the sector. All right, Voigt said finally, his voice steady. We hit their logistics first. That got heads turning. Harrow frowned. You sure about that? Going after their supply lines with what we've got? Cut their fuel. They slow down. We hit their comm relays. They go blind. Hit fast, hit small. Bleed them with 1,000 cuts. Arg's tone hardened. We can't take them head on, but we don't have to. Not yet. Rill grinned. Guerrilla strikes. Classic belt move. Arg nodded. We know these rocks better than they do. That's our edge. He moved towards the sidewall where a portable console was patched into the station's exterior sensor grid. Start assembling strike groups. Small teams. Fast movers. Keep them mobile. Harrow crossed his arms. And you? Arg glanced back at the Dust Widow, visible on a monitor feed from Dock 4. Me? Arg gave a crooked smile. I've got a ship to finish. Over the next few hours, the war room transformed. Captains split off into clusters, drawing up flight plans. Engineers passed out field upgrade kits, extra thruster nozzles, sensor scramblers, improvised armor plating. Someone dragged in crates of old mining charges, now repurposed as anti-ship proximity mines. The comm network buzzed non-stop. Arg spent most of it knee-deep in the Widow's engine bay, sleeves rolled up, grease smeared to his elbows. His hands moved on instinct, stripping coolant lines, welding new couplers, rerouting damaged power feeds. Every once in a while he'd paused, staring at some section of the ship with a far-off look in his eyes. Tara's voice would drip up from somewhere deep in memory. Overbuild the coolant flow, you idiot. She's gonna run hot if you push her like that. Arg chuckled once under his breath. Yeah, I know, he murmured. By the time the second shift bell sounded across Vega Point's battered corridors, the Widow's new reactor was humming at low idle. Not flight ready yet, but alive. Arg wiped the sweat from his face, took a long pull from a water pack, and looked out across the hangar. Dozens of ships, hundreds of people, the free people of the belt. His people now, whether he wanted them or not. And this time, he wasn't running. Chapter 16. The fuse lit. The hum of the Dust Widow's new reactor filled the cramped cockpit like a living thing. Every panel blinked green, every system running smooth. The months of repairs and upgrades were finally paying off. Arg sat behind the controls, hands steady on the throttle, eyes scanning the external sensor feed. Ahead, the void stretched out cold and endless. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was full of targets. A small fleet of unarmed Helix logistics ships drifted slowly near the outer edge of the Jovian corridor, clustered like a slow-moving caravan. Fuel tenders, supply barges, a few refueling drones buzzing lazily. Arg's comm crackled softly. Harrow, you reading? Loud and clear, voice responded, tense but controlled. Struck Team Delta is in position, waiting for your go. Arg took a slow breath, the weight of everything pressed down. Months of loss, rage, survival, and the whispered memory of Terra's quiet strength. He glanced at the HUD and then spoke. All right, teams. Eyes sharp. Hit and run. Disrupt. Do not get caught. The widow shuddered as Arg eased her forward, thrusters igniting in a controlled burn. The cold void blurred past as speeds climbed. The strike wasn't about glory. It was about survival. Whittling away Helix's advantage, one supply ship at a time. Minutes later, the widow closed in on the largest fuel tender. Arg's fingers dancing across the targeting console, locking onto vulnerable points. Target acquired, a soft hiss. Then the launch of several modified mining charges, improvised explosives devices designed to detonate near the ship's critical fuel lines. Seconds ticked by. Then, boom! A violent shockwave rippled through the fuel tender's hull. Flames blossomed outward in a deadly corona of fire and molten metal. Arg felt the widow jolt from the blast's aftershock, but the upgraded hull held firm. Delta team, hit your marks, Arg ordered. The other ships in the strike group flared forward, each releasing their own payloads. Explosions bloomed across the Helix caravan, ripping apart the unarmed barges and severing drone links. Chaos erupted. Helix security scrambled response vessel, but Arg's team melted back into the asteroid fields, using the belt's familiar terrain as a shield. Back on Vega Point, the comms channels exploded with cheers. Hours later, Arg sat alone in the widow's cockpit, nursing a hot drink. He let the adrenaline fade, replaced by exhaustion. His comm chimed again. Void Miner? You're live? Rel's voice crackled through. Arg rubbed his face. Yeah, I'm here. Status? Damage done. Helix fuel runs disrupted. Their supply chain's bleeding. A pause. But they'll respond. Harder. Faster. Arg's eyes drifted to the viewport where distant stars shimmered like cold witnesses. Yeah, I'm getting too old for this. Chapter 17. Shadows and Echoes. The stars were steady tonight. Arg watched them through the widow's canopy, jaws tight, arms crossed as the ship hung in low drift just off Vega Point. From this angle, the station was a silhouette, a scarred, lopsided shape with flickering lights and freshly scorched plating. It looked like it should have been abandoned months ago, maybe years, but it wasn't. Not yet. Beneath the widow's hull, the belt churned. Ships came and went like blood cells through a wounded body. Converted prospectors, refitted bulk freighters, jury-rigged long-range scouts. None of them built for war. None of them meant to carry weapons. But all of them had shown up anyway, because Arg had asked them to. He hated that. He hated how easily his voice had become a rallying cry. He never wanted to lead anyone. He just wanted to be left alone, out in the quiet, digging rocks, remembering Terra in fragments and silence. But the war didn't care what he wanted. Neither did Helix. The comm panel buzzed, breaking the stillness. Rel's voice, low and tired. We've got new scans. Helix has pulled 3 more heavy units into the corridor. They're arming forward defenses. No more supply runs without resistance. Arg exhaled through his nose. They're setting a net. Looks like it. They know we're bleeding them. He didn't respond right away. His fingers hovered over the widow's control interface, flexing slightly, like a man unsure whether to throw a punch or offer a handshake. Status of the fleet? He asked finally. 54 ships confirmed in system. 15 with combat-grade weapons, another dozen barely patched together, but flying. The rest, they're willing. Arg nodded, more to himself than the open channel. Fuel? Low, Rel admitted. Ammo's worse. Every other pilot's got homebrew ordnance or salvaged missiles from 20 years back. One guy's flying with mining lasers rigged to explode if they overheat. Arg cracked a dry smile. Sounds about right. He muted the channel and stood up from the pilot's chair, stretching slowly. His ribs still ached. The bruises were purple now, yellow around the edges, fading, but not forgotten. He walked back towards the widow's small engineering alcove. Tools lay scattered on the workbench. He picked up a spanner and turned it over in his hand, not really seeing it. Tara's voice came again. Not loud, not clear. Just a memory scraping against the inside of his thoughts. You never sit still when you're worried. You pace. You fix things that don't need fixing. He looked up at the ceiling. I'm not worried, he muttered. The ship disagreed. The widow vibrated gently under his boots, her new power core running too warm despite recent adjustments. It was nothing dangerous yet, but it was another thing he'd have to watch. Another variable to juggle when everything else started falling apart, because it would, sooner than anyone expected. He returned to the cockpit, lowered himself into the seat, and brought the communications interface online. A live feed request blinked, his own, scheduled from days ago. He hadn't been sure if he was going to do it, not until now, but he needed something to say. The system synced with the Void Miner channel. The subscriber count had nearly doubled since the first strike against Helix. Comments flew too fast to be read. Names he didn't recognize, call signs, messages from other belts, other systems, solo miners, crew haulers, station janitors. He activated the camera. The light blinked red. He didn't speak right away. The background was dark, just him and the cold glint of stars. Finally, Arg leaned forward, hands folded in front of him. This isn't the video I wanted to make tonight, he said. Hell, I didn't want to make it at all. He paused, licking his lips dry. My name's Arg. Most of you know that by now. Some of you have followed this channel since I first started narrating mining runs out of sheer boredom. Back when it was just me and the Dust Widow drifting through the belts, trying to stay sane, trying not to feel too much. Another pause, the kind that carried weight. I didn't ask for a war, but it found me. It found all of us. The live chat flared. He ignored it. I've lost things in this life. A lot. I lost Terror before I even bought this ship. Lost friends to the cold, to rock slides, to engine fires, to EVA malfunctions. That's life in the belt. We endure. We move forward. His voice tightened. But Helix isn't just trying to win. They're trying to wipe us off the map. They don't want the belt to be free. They want it controlled, choked, branded, taxed, enslaved. A long breath. I don't know if we can win this. I won't lie to you. We're outgunned, outnumbered. Every statistic says we should fold. He leaned in slightly, his tone hardening. But I tell you what the stats don't know. They don't know how stubborn we are, how inventive, how willing we are to fight for something that matters. The belt is home. It's hard. It's cruel. But it's ours. No boardroom on Luna or Mars gets to take that away. He looked straight into the camera. So Helix wanted a war against the free people of the belt. Now the free people of the belt have declared war right back. The feed expanded around him. A growing wave of camera tiles appeared. Other pilots, other ships. A chorus of voices rising in agreement. One by one, they echoed him. With you, Arg. For the belt. We hold the line. Arg sat back, watching them. Then he gave a single grim nod. This is Void Miner. Signing off. He cut the feed, and the silence that followed felt like a promise. Chapter 18. Pressure Lines. The air inside Vega Point's command deck was dense and still, like the breath held before a storm. The artificial atmosphere had a tang of ozone and grease, overlaid with the scent of tired bodies and burned-out circuits. The ceiling lights flickered faintly, casting thin shadows over the cracked floor tiles. It felt like a bunker from a war that hadn't officially started, but everyone knew better. Arg stood in front of the central hollow table, hands on the edge, knuckles pale with pressure. Before him, a rotating projection displayed the sector grid in sharp red and blue relief. The red lines were growing bolder. Helix ships expanding their perimeter, sector by sector, rock by rock, like roots sinking deeper into the soil of the belt. Vega Point had become the de facto war room, not because it was strong, but because it hadn't been taken. Yet. Rel leaned against a pillar nearby, eyes flicking between the feed and the tablet in his hand. That's the third Helix logistics character in 20 hours. Minimal escort, moving toward their front line. Arg didn't look away. They're getting comfortable. Overconfident, Rel muttered. Dangerous, Harrow added as he entered the room, a data pad clutched in his oil-smeared fingers. And efficient. They're building an orbital scan grid near the Callisto Drift. Once that goes live, every cave, crack, and shadow we're hiding in gets lit like a flare. Arg turned. How long until the grid's operational? 36 hours, 40 tops, Harrow said grimly. They've got satellites in place, relay ships running calibration sweeps, all backed by that monster. He gestured to the hologram. A red triangle pulsed slowly in the middle of the map. Helix Command Cruiser Judicator. The thing looked like a shark with armor, bristling with heat sinks, drone cradles, and kinetic flak arrays. She was built to take hits, throw them back twice as hard, and keep moving. The Judicator is command and control for the whole net, Harrow said. We take it down, we blind them. And if we don't? Rel asked. Then the belt's over, Arg said quietly. They'll have eyes everywhere. No more hiding, no more resistance. Silence fell. Rel crossed his arms. I'll take it you have a plan? Arg pointed to a rotating belt of glowing debris on the holomap, a tight loop of thermic dust and frozen particulate circulating in a small moonlet near the cruiser's patrol range. That field's unstable. Radiation from the moon's core heats it up unpredictably. No standard Helix ship will enter it. They can't track targets in there, and their heat shielding won't hold under pressure. Harrow frowned. Ours won't either, not for long. Arg nodded. That's why we don't stay long. We drift in slow, cold engines, silent bird. Slingshot through the inner orbit, use the dust for cover, and hit them in a blind spot. You want to fly a burning mining ship through a radioactive slush storm just to flank a Helix command cruiser? Rel asked. I've done worse, Arg said flatly. Harrow shook his head in disbelief, but he didn't argue. We need someone to scramble their comms just before the run, Arg added. If they catch even a whisper of Widow's signature, we're done. Already working on it, Rel said. I've got 3 tech crews building relay ghosts. We plant them on the edge of the scan net, one pulse hardwired, just long enough to blind their eyes. Good. That gives us one shot. He didn't say what they all knew. They probably wouldn't get another. Back aboard the Dust Widow, the mood shifted. The ship felt tense, like she knew something was coming. Arg worked in the lower crawl space of the reactor bay, wedged between 2 conduit ribs, tightening the new power couplings by hand. The diagnostics bots had flagged a 3% efficiency loss in the port side auxiliary drive. Could be a misread, could be death at the wrong moment. He didn't trust automation, not for this. As he reached for a calibration tool, he paused, still crouched in the narrow channel. His breath loud in the confined space. His heart thudded too fast. You get like this when you're about to do something reckless. Tara's voice. It wasn't loud, just there, right behind his left ear, like she always used to stand when she was reading over his shoulder. He closed his eyes. I don't want to die in this tin can, Tara, he said softly. No answer, just the hum of the widow's core. It wasn't guilt, he felt. It was weariness. A kind of bone-deep fatigue that sleep didn't fix. He missed her clarity, her grounding. And right now, when every choice might get someone killed, he missed her the most. Arg climbed back out of the crawl space and stood in the ship's narrow corridor, letting the low throb of the reactor soak into him. Later, he walked the hangars. The pilots were still arriving. He passed ships patched together with scrap plates and welded steel. Some bore family crests scrawled in paint. Some had children's name etched into the hull. Inside one, a woman was turning a railgun with her son asleep beside her in a pilot chair. A few ships down, 2 men were arguing over fusion cells. Next to them, a teenager sat cross-legged on the floor, sharpening a boarding spike with a look in her eye that said she'd already seen too much. This was who had come to fight. Not soldiers. Survivors. He didn't interrupt them. He just kept walking, watching. At dawn cycle, he returned to Command Deck 1. The lights were dim. Projection displays flickering with tracking data. Most of the captains were gathered, crowded around makeshift benches and repurposed crates. Arg stood near the front. "I'm not going to give you a speech," he said. The room quieted. "You know what this is. You've seen what they're doing. What they'll keep doing if we let them." He paused, scanning the room, the tired eyes, the clenched jaws. "Helix wants to control the belt because they think we can't fight back. They think we're weak, broken, scattered." He straightened. "They're wrong." A beat. "They're trying to see us, track us, tag us, pin us to a wall." A ripple of anger in the room. "We're going to take out their eye, and we're going to do it together." No cheering, no applause, just nods. Quiet, grim, determined. They understood. The belt was under pressure, but pressure made diamonds. Chapter 19. Through Dust and Fire. The thermic dust belt loomed ahead like a living storm. From a distance, it was just a glowing ring of debris, a faint hollow around a dead moonlet. But the closer the Dust Widow crept, the more it looked like it truly was. A meat grinder of particulate chaos. Superheated ions crackled in the swirling haze, forming flickering curtains of radiation and static lightning. Raw energy arced from drifting fragments to rock to hull to dust. An endless ballet of destruction. Arg had seen some bad routes in his time. Unstable debris fields, fusions leaking mid-rank, asteroid clusters mid-break. But this was something else. It looked alive, hungry. He stared at the tactical overlay on the forward display, tracing the plotted curve one last time. It cut into the field in a slow drift, keeping heat signatures low, engines throttled to near nothing. If he did it right, he'd slingshot through the upper arc of the dust field using the gravitational drag of the moonlet, bypassing Helix's long-range sensors entirely. A tight shot, no margin for error. If he did it wrong, there wouldn't be enough left to identify. Rel's voice crackled through the comm, heavy with static. Even this close, the Widow's shields had to compensate. "Relay ghosts in position. Signal scramblers prepped. You'll have 12 minutes of interference when we trigger. Not one more." Arg responded without looking away from the display. "That'll be enough." "You're flying through hell, Arg. You sure about this?" "Nope." Pause. Then Rel chuckled grimly. "That's how I know it'll work." Arg leaned forward and keyed open a systems tab. The Widow's engines purred gently, dampened to whisper. The heat sinks were peaking just shy of dangerous. Any more stress and they'd start venting plasma trails, which would be like lighting a flare for Helix's sensors. He opened a small side compartment beneath the console and pulled out an old battered data pad. It was the one he used when he still logged journal entries for himself, not the channel, not the show, just him. The first file was still dated 9 years ago. The last, right before Kovac. He clicked record. "This might be my last log. If it is, don't go romanticizing it. I'm not flying this run to be a hero. I'm flying it because no one else could, and someone had to. That's the whole secret to the belt, isn't it? Someone always has to." He paused, eyes scanning the storm beyond. "To anyone who finds this, keep fighting. Not because it gets easier, but because it doesn't. And someone still has to." He ended the log. As the Dust Widow eased into the thermic field, the hull began to glow. The radiation shimmered around her like blue fire, casting strange shadows across the cockpit. The static filled his ears like the whispers of a crowd too far to see. He thought of Tara, of the hospital room, of her last breath, of the silence that followed, and of the quiet that came years later, drifting alone between broken rocks, thinking that maybe that was all he'd ever have again. He didn't want to die, but more than that, He didn't want the belt to die with him. Arg's hands tightened on the controls. "All right, Widow," he whispered. "Let's dance." Outside, the storm began to scream. The Widow dove into it. Metal groaned under pressure. Particles lashed at her shields. The nav system blared multiple warnings. Artificial gravity trembled. Reactor heat rose into the red. Arg kept her steady, hands light but unshaking. 7 minutes in, halfway through the arc. Then, flashes. He saw them through the storm. Shapes. Ships. Helix drones patrolling just outside the interference veil. They didn't see him. Yet. Arg cut power to all non-essential systems. Went cold. Just another fragment in the storm. 6 more minutes. Back on Vega Point, the fleet waited. Rel watched the mission feed with clenched fists. The Widow's telemetry was down. No visuals. No return pings. "She's not broadcasting," one tech said, nervous. "No heartbeat." "She will," Rel answered. "She's Arg's ship." Inside the storm, Arg saw the cruiser now. The Judicator. A behemoth in silhouette. Its tower rose like a fortress, surrounded by shrouds of armor and clouds of drone swarms. Arg powered up. Just a whisper. He reached the launch point. Slowed the ship to a crawl, and then engines flared. Weapons armed. The Widow screamed out of the dust like a thrown knife. Chapter 20. Giants fall hard. Judicator filled the Dust Widow's viewport like a nightmare from some ancient war. A titan bristling with armor, weapon hardpoints, and a dozen different sensor domes that twitched like eyes looking for prey. The cruiser was broad across the belly, housing the tactical core and relay grid for Helix's entire scanning operations. Arg surged from the dust cloud like a bullet, engines screaming under the strain. Every gauge on his console danced near red. Warning lights blinked in time with the Widow's groans. He felt the heat through his boots, the rumbles of overworked stabilizers vibrating through the chair. "Come on, hold," he growled. "Hold together. Just a little longer." The Judicator's sensor net sparked. Too late. Widow's cold entry and the ghost signal scrambling had brought him just enough. He punched in the command sequence, loading the payload into the belly launcher. 2 high-yield concussion torpedoes, 1 EMP mine, all tied into a tight manual override trigger. He'd have 1 pass, 1 chance. And every second he lingered inside the Judicator's defense radius was a second closer to death. As he angled toward the ship's underbelly, flak guns opened up, slicing the storm with 100 steel-piercing rounds per second. Arg jerked the Widow into a roll, shaving off his shielding but threading the fire. 1 torpedo fired. Then the second. He flared engines to throw off the lock-on signals and dumped the EMP, then dove. The Widow shook violently as fragments of near misses tore across her aft plating. Sparks flew from the console. One of the displays died. Smoke filled the cockpit. Behind him, the Judicator lit up. The first torpedo slammed into the comms spine, sparks and molten plating erupting in a wash of orange and blue. The second detonated along the ship's flanking array, blowing a chunk of the armor clean into space. And the EMP? The pulse surged like a silent scream across the cruiser's hull. Every light blinked, then blacked out. For 5 long seconds, the Judicator was blind, deaf, frozen. Arg had barely cleared the outer debris ring when he hit the record toggle on his backup helmet cam. The Widow's primary systems were damaged, power running low, but this message had to get out. He steadied his breath. Blood was trickling down his temple. A cut. Probably from the console impact. Didn't matter. He looked at the camera. "This is Arg aboard the Dust Widow." The stars wheeled slowly behind him. Chaotic. Burning. The Judicator drifted in the background. Lights dead. Pieces of its hull still breaking apart and spinning. "You just watched me take down a Helix command ship. Alone. In a ship older than half the junk floating in this belt." He wiped blood from his cheek, breathing heavily. "Helix think the belt is weak. That we scatter when they roar. and we bend when they push. He leaned in slightly, voice lower, steadier. Well, here's your proof. Even giants fall. All it takes is one ship and someone who refuses to back down. The camera caught the Judicator as its reactor began a slow chain failure, internal containment cracking. A white flash flared as a secondary detonation tore through the aft section. Arg didn't even flinch. This is for the free people of the belt, for every driller, hauler, loner, and lost soul they've tried to erase. You're not alone. And if they want a war, the explosion reflected in his visor, glowing bright, then they got one. He cut the feed. Back on Vega Point, the video spread faster than a fire in vacuum. Miners paused mid-repairs. Engineers shouted down the hall. Commanders watched in stunned silence as the broadcast played on every cracked screen, every HUD, every comm slate. Helix's indestructible flagship, neutralized by one man in a battered old hauler. It became more than a strike. It became a symbol. And across the belt, people rose. The end of Part 1 of Book 3, Void Miner, The Belt War.